So let's start. It's 4 p.m., 4:01 p.m. This is our, what is now the full meeting? I think so.
Third.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Of the land use group. Let's first start with a roll call of this group. We have at least two online. So let me just quickly read the names and then we have it. So Rob Almeida. Out here, Keith Bergman,
Present.
Paul Boom,
Present here.
Phil Griffith is not here. He had something. Mary Hartman,
Here.
Judith Long.
Here.
You have a little echo, Judith. Tracy Marano. I don't see her online. Mark Martinez. And Sven Weber, myself. So we just make quorum here for this group. Just a few words. We have an unusual setting here in the beginning. We have, when we discussed the MCI tour and what we learned, we also will be joined by the MCI advisory board members here. And then I think then you will do a roll call on your group and making sure you can freely talk and deliberate or whatever. Yeah.
Do you want me to do that now?
Sure, it would be a good idea.
Yeah, then if you want to do it now, okay, it's just for the records, Mark Martinez just walked in. We have one
We have
more.
to do the select board thing.
Yeah. So you want to do it now?
Sure.
Okay,
I'm gonna start with Peter,
Present.
Linda Miller,
Present.
John Boynton, present. Lee Smith,
present.
Dan Gainsborough, present. But we got this, yep, looks like Patrick is online. Patrick,
Present.
and I think Scott might be. I thought I saw.
So well, it's not
Scott.
note taker at a certain point.
Maybe not.
Okay,
Okay,
and I'm just gonna announce that the select board's also noticed for this meeting, and there's 4 of us present. So Mark Howell, Mary Hartman,
Here.
Wendy Ravelli,
Benny,
Randy. You ready?
Sorry, I'm here. Technical difficulties. Thanks.
Paul.
here.
All right, and I don't see Cameron, but that's the car anyway.
Okay, so also for everyone, additional remark is Scott Bates resigned as a member of this group. This was primarily driven by a double time commitments of 2 very heavy workload driven committees or advisory boards, the MCI advisory board and this year. And then you will figure out and talk with your group and who you nominate and who will send.
I think we haven't voted on it, but we have nominated, Linda. And she's very kindly agreed to it, so yeah, so we just need to formalize the vote.
And does that need to be confirmed by the select board denomination?
Yes, it does.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
We couldn't do anything radical like vote on it since we've got a majority right now.
I think it was not on the agenda
Yeah,
for both groups to vote on this. Yeah,
So much for being radical.
And it's a 2-step process of the select board nomination. One week.
So our next meeting is, I believe, on the 5th. Second. So we will pick it up as an order of business.
so can we, in the meantime, until you have it and until the select board confirmed, treat Linda as an observer or just in the group being here so that she can.
Why don't we nominate at the next select board meeting and the advisory board can vote on it?
yeah.
Yeah.
That'll speed it.
Yeah.
Otherwise. it'll be-
Yeah, it'll be October before Linda's.
Okay, let's do it that way.
What are we doing?
So we do nothing now, we'll only wait for them to.
You're gonna nominate her
act.
at your next meeting,
Yeah, the select board
and
will.
then appoint her as the one after.
Look at me, you're looking at me like this, to do something.
No, no.
That's all I asked.
No. Okay, with that out of the way, let's first go to agenda item 2, the approval of the minutes of the land use group from July 30th, August 8th, and August 13th. I hope everyone had a chance to review them and any changes, comments?
I just had one question on the meeting minutes on. The date and these, this is the July 30th. I want to make sure we capture on the organizational chart detailing which departments. We also asked Tracy Morano for information on Ripley School personnel in Ripley. Is it? I mean, is it
So we can add that,
implied in there? Or it should be town and school.
And that.
Yeah.
okay? Any other comments? So do I hear a motion to approve subject to the changes just discussed?
So moved.
A second.
Okay, let's do a roll call. Keith Bergman,
Aye.
Paul Böhm,
Aye.
Mary Hartman,
Yes.
Judith Long,
Yes.
Mark Martinez,
Yes.
Sven Weber, yes. So here it approved. Now let's go to the bigger agenda item here with the debrief of our MCI tour and any discussions. You feel comfortable sitting over there? Should we move people here? Yeah. You have plenty of room.
Plenty of chairs.
Oh, over there. Okay.
Ah,
Hello, I was inviting you here.
That's too much pressure.
it's a joint meeting.
So, just again, a preface here is for us as the land use group, we are not kind of reinventing the wheel of what the MCI advisory group is doing. So, just to be clear, you're already doing, I don't know, over a year of work. There's a lot of effort put in, a lot of intelligence. Our role is more kind of one step above it to see how all of this in the end fits with the different property needs across it. And potentially just at a certain point, discuss scenarios we might have in mind, but it doesn't mean these are the scenarios that we in the end will recommend. So these are things where we have to catch up and learn a lot on what you all did. So don't take it as something we are just coming and steamrolling or doing changes or anything like that. This is, I think, an unfortunate timing that we started over a year later than what you did. And now our role is catch up and see, is there an MCI scenario in one way or the other which we need to consider, or just put in a trash can right away because you looked already on it already and tell us no way, or you tell us there are these different puzzle pieces you might want to consider in our work. Ultimately, whatever kind of we are looking at, it always goes to the select board. The select board is the deciding body in the end, is what needs to be done. But for us, it's a bigger puzzle piece you play around with. So with this preamble, I would like to first start perhaps in the thoughts of the group members on our side of what we saw and what questions came up. We also prepared a little document. In that case, it was Judith did a lot of work in preparing a document on MCI based on the information we got so far. And that's a living document on information collection. So that will start evolving over time. And the idea is just, if this is a document you all like, is should we have a similar structure for the different properties, or at least for the larger properties we have a look at, and where we collect the information on that specific property. But we can touch on do we want to use that when we talk about our other debriefs and other tours. So I see Mark, you were.
Just a question. So, I'm not sure of the formality, but, would it be possible to get sort of the very sort of elevator 60-second overview of where the MCI advisory board is. Cause there has been some confusion as in specifically some members thought, you know, sort of the horse was out of the barn, if you will, and there's a very discrete path as to where the MCI, you know, advisory board is going. Wasn't quite sure where the select board was going ultimately. I think it's gonna go to town meeting. And one of the questions, I still don't understand just personally how sort of Junction Village fits in. Is it part of it, not part of it? Can we break it off? So Dan or John, I'm not sure who the chair is, but I'd love sort of the, you know, sort of really basic, and I know a report came out. And I did go over to, you know, Warner's Pond and participate in sort of that scenario. I spoke to the consultants and I understand the 3 phases. But specifically, I think one of the things we're trying to do is get a granular sense as to what options there may be at MCI. And we were sort of led to believe maybe the answer is 0. There's no municipal option. If that's the case, that's totally fine. But I think it would be helpful to get sort of the overview.
And so, I'll take a first crack at it. I'm fortunate today, actually, that I've got all my chairs of our subcommittees here. So I'd love to have their thoughts on it too. I can tell you where we're at right now, Mark. Basically, we have our next meeting on September 2nd. And the plan is for that meeting to try to begin to coalesce around one of the 3 scenarios, or quite candidly, and probably to develop a hybrid of one of those 3 options. So to the degree that people are familiar with that, and I encourage you to take a look at it. There's just dramatically oversimplifying it. It goes from fairly, if it's a continuum that has sort of more, perhaps depending upon one's perspective, municipal benefits or programmatic, to one that is more commercial housing intensive. And so in that first one on this side of it, there was some consideration, or has been some consideration, although not a really deep dive in terms of understanding what it would mean for the site, to potentially include some municipal program on it. So the second is about trying to put a stake in the ground and begin to coalesce around one of, or as I said, a hybrid of one of those options. And we're very eager to hear what you guys are thinking for it, and what programmatically might make sense from the work that you're doing to belong in there on the site. So.
Excellent opening question. I think the other question that we should all be addressing today is what's the timetable? And it's not even necessarily what our timetable is, it's what's the state's timetable. The state, for example, is requiring the town of Concord to amend its MBTA community zoning district by next June, which requires a town meeting vote in order to come into compliance with the MBTA communities law. That there was feedback received from the town in June, which the town has 1 year to act on. One of the things that I think has been discussed at MCI meetings, I know it's been discussed at other meetings, is that one of the things to be fixed is that at least 50% of the MBTA acreage needs to be contiguous. So if you take the currently largest sub-district in West Concord, sub-district 4, which has 31.6 acres, and you add 51 to it, you get a sub-district of 82.6 acres, which is 59%, over 50% of the then resulting total MBTA acreage of 39 acres. So the idea, town meeting voters asked when we adopted MBTA community zoning back in April of 2024, can we add MCI Concord? And I'm sure that there are other scenarios that the town will need to look at in the near future, to come into compliance, but it seems like an obvious option is to add MCI Concord to the MBTA communities zone, and if so, we have until now and next June to do that. The other issue is, I think, two timetables. I'm unclear on what the timetable is for the state DCAM's expectation of when they want to bring zoning. When they want zoning brought to Concord Town Meeting for approval. And if that's next year, we ought to know that. The other issue that I'm also unclear on from trying to follow meetings, at what point is a decision get made on the wastewater system? Is that, did I hear correctly that it's a year from now? I heard somebody say August, where that we have until August. I presume that doesn't mean this month, it means a year from now. To negotiate with the state about MCI. So whatever the framework ends up being, I think that's vitally important information to know about how much time do we have to figure out these things and what are we going to know when? Because for me, the critical issue is wastewater capacity to be able to do anything at MCI Concord or anywhere in town. And whatever timetable that takes to figure it out, I think is vitally important for us to figure out.
So I'm gonna take a stab at trying to unpack, there's a lot of stuff in that, what you just said. I think, first of all, I think to oversimplify it, from DCAM's perspective, they would like us to be working on zoning right now. And so the motivation and the drive for the advisory board on the September 2nd is to try to begin to coalesce. We need to pick a path so that we can begin to develop zoning to support that. So whether that, I think it would be very challenging to be ready for an annual town meeting with 2026. That said, I don't know that anyone on our end has given up on it, but that's certainly a goal. I think relative to your point about the sewer treatment plant, I think Alan can probably answer that better than I can. There has been an extension on the negotiations. And you're absolutely correct. That's a critical piece, as is understanding how the site's going to be accessed. So that's my stab at a couple of the points that we make. Do you want to address the junction? All right, thank you.
So I'm Lee Smith. I'm a board member of Concord Housing Development Corporation, or CHDC. CHDC owns the Junction Village parcel through a subsidiary. And at the time that the prison closure was announced, we were in the middle of a request for a proposal process. We were actually doing a site tour just a couple of days before the announcement came. So when that happened, CHGC as a board decided to just pause the RFP process, thinking that because it's contiguous, it may make sense to incorporate it in what ultimately becomes the redevelopment of that site. And we've just been extending our holding pattern to wait and see how this shakes out. So not speaking for the whole board, but you assume that it could be made available without knowing exactly what it would be yet, and I think subject to the board's approval at the right time.
So just follow up question.
We have a few, just wait a minute. So Patrick McCurdy has hand up also.
Thanks, Ben. I did want to maybe help address, I think, the first question that was asked, which is, how have municipal uses been considered? And I would say they have, as part of our planning process, have been considered. I think one consideration for MCI maybe that is relatively different than other parcels that the land use working group is looking at is how the state has and DCAM have guided us as to what their aims are. And so the disposition of the MCI parcel will needs to meet a certain set of criteria, which we've taken into account. I think probably everybody knows the broad outlines of which a major one is the economic feasibility lens, which you would have seen in the report. And so for the site to be economically feasible, it starts with a number of somewhere between $30 to $50 million of demolition and remediation. That's just to get it back to zero, right? And so who is paying for that is yet to be determined. One of the assumptions in the agency report that was published is that a private developer would pay for that. And so as you think about the uses of that site, if, the less acreage that is viable for, I would say, non-municipal uses or non-town uses, the less, the less or the higher the hurdles to become economically feasible, right? And so I think in our initial scenarios, that's why you did not see larger uses of municipal partitioning, because it doesn't work in those economic models that were considered. All right, and so that is, my colleagues on the board can chime in to correct me where I'm wrong or add color, but that's why you did not see municipal uses heavily featured in any of those scenarios in large part.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. So Elizabeth Hughes, you probably are good you have the hand up for the planning process. Yeah.
To Keith's comment about the MBTA communities, the planning board next Tuesday evening will be reviewing. Currently, they have 4 different scenarios to address the state's conditional compliance level, conditional compliance letter. So they are going to start that conversation. Putting the MCI Concord land into the district is not something that they have discussed. I think for a couple of reasons. One, similar with a few other areas that were originally discussed, not sure that having MCI Concord in the MBTA overlay district, which then has the by right multifamily at 15 units per acre, is a direction that in general the community may not want to go to that extreme. Also from a planning perspective, until the visioning process and the zoning process starts taking off, I don't think the planning board would make an assumption that having by right multifamily is something that they would move forward while the visioning and the zoning community process is still actively going on. But they are looking at a couple of other scenarios already.
Yeah, thank you. Mark?
So just to follow, so who owns the housing development corporation?
I mean, it doesn't have shareholders, it's creation of statute, special legislation created it.
But so here's where I'm going. So what's been very enlightening to me is that we have taken tours of fire, police, and DPW. So DPW is looking at somewhere between 13 and 15 acres. That's what they would ideally like. Now, probably don't get what you ideally want. However, we're trying to sort of fill out this puzzle. And if you ask the question, where are there 13 acres or thereabouts, centrally located, what are the options? And if you put Junction Village in play, that's an option. If you put MCI in play, that's an option. The former Starmut site, I think, has traffic and other issues. In my own, just speaking for myself, not an option. So unfortunately, the tours are super enlightening. I mean, you look at the level of even compliance with code and electric plumbing, what have you. So, we're being taxed with, how to fill out the puzzle. and what goes where. And then that's on top of huge budgetary sort of environmental concerns, you know, as far as making it all fit in some sort of staggered way. So I don't mean to be difficult or cute, I'm just trying to figure out who can make decisions, you know, on MCI, we'll figure that out, who can make it on the housing authority, who can make it on PVD, who can make it on 229 Main. And how do we get those stakeholders, if you will, to the table to start making decisions? Because ultimately, the committee is gonna have to start making some really hard decisions.
Let me add your first, yeah.
Yeah, so related to that, following up on that, I mean, Mark stated correctly, sort of our current mission is where does fire, police, DPW go? There are subsequent missions on this task force. In the layout of, when you talk about municipal scenario one, it's none of those. The municipal, in your scenarios, municipal assets that benefit the town, but not necessarily public safety or DPW, right? So definitionally, you're not talking about, none of your scenarios have public works or fire and safety, right?
Actually, our first one does.
Yeah.
The first one does have that.
It does.
The differentiation, I think, the distinction is that when we say municipal uses, it's basically uses that will not generate tax revenue to the town. It will not be developed by third-party developers. Right, so it could be a municipal, it could be a senior center, it could be a DPW site, it could be a police station.
Okay, so you're not
So-
cutting off any of its municipal needs in general.
Correct, and again, that's what, the point I wanted to make from Mark's original question. Around the role of the advisory board. We are advisory to the select board, right, so we are charged with coming up with a recommendation for what might be done. We decide nothing, right? So we're gonna base our recommendation on all that we've learned, including from a lot of public input about what the community would like to see there, right? Now that, set of community wishes did not take into consideration all the other parcels that's broken at, right? Because if that had been incorporated in the survey, then it might be that you would have heard some very different things. So I just want to make the point that we are advisory. On September 2nd, we're gonna start to form our recommendation to the select board. There are several challenges. We all want to see something done with MCI as soon as possible. That's a real priority. You know that, we want it to be accessible, but you heard about the fact that there's $30 to $50 million of remediation cost just to get the site to the point where it can be developed. We've got the wastewater treatment question, right? It turns out that that plant that we wanted to buy is actually not been well maintained over many years. So it's a huge price tag to get it to do what it's capable of doing. And the third piece is the Route 2 redesign, right? We've been told that could take as long as 5 years to get to a final design. We've also been told that in 6 to 9 months, we could have a good idea as to what the ultimate design would be. But it does make it challenging to figure out what the best reuse, the optimal reuse of MCI is. When we have these three huge questions that are very hard to answer.
And I think we have to acknowledge that neither you nor we have right now like really answers or can nail it down with 100% certainty. Yeah, so I think we the moment it is us catching up, so don't take these questions as any offensive, but we try to understand where you are.
Yeah, thank you, Sven. So just to sort of add on to Lee's discussion of the Junction Village site, one of the recommendations that we're considering making to the select board is to see if they can negotiate with the state to allow the deed restriction for Junction Village, which restricts it to affordable housing, to be lifted and the number of units sort of spread throughout the entire parcel. So that, that may come into play. in the Future, and then
Yeah.
all of the sites are encumbered by the riverfront setback. And requirement you can't build within 200 feet unless it's already an existing municipal use like the wastewater treatment facility.
I think in one scenario, at least that when we had the tours, when we had the initial discussions with around the water treatment facility, is that there are also these sand pits, and some of the sand pits extended sand pit into the junction village, which could even extend or make it easier to get a permit for the sand pits and increase our wastewater capacity over and above. So that is something definitely I think is in the public works subgroup that they will try to get their hands around is how much of that.
So is that possibly dependent on what Peter just said, the ability to spread out the junction? The housing beyond Junction Village, if you're using part of Junction Village for sand,
Well,
for example?
Under the zoning, as Elizabeth can tell us, municipal uses are allowed in any zoning district, so that you may be able to make it work without achieving the deed restriction being moved, but it would certainly be much better if it was lifted and we can spread it throughout the entire site.
The challenges are access though. I mean, Junction Village, it has no frontage on a public way. Apart from the Bruce Freeman rail trail, that the access, right, the legal access. To the site has been Winthrop Street. And that's it, and it's not near any other public way, so it would be. It would be not well suited for a police and fire facility. It could be for some public works functions if it didn't make, if the distance out to Com Ave or Route 2 didn't matter, but.
Well, isn't there access through the waste treatment plant and you get to the waste treatment plant from,
Elm Place, and it,
yeah, right?
that was a possibility we looked at, and it just, DOC didn't allow it. That was-
Yeah, at the time,
Right.
but some of the scenarios, for example, the agency put forward envisioned some kind of service road. It would run generally parallel to Route 2, which does give you some options, and depending on how they design the, change the design of Commonwealth Avenue. For example, if Commonwealth Avenue is a flyover grade separated on Route 2, then that starts to improve the access for the site. I'll just throw this into the mix from the perspective of those of us on the select board. We recognize that this is a very challenging set of questions that we're asking. And what we're really looking for both of these boards to do is to identify some goals that they feel are, overall beneficial to the town, to the region, to the state. Because we're going to have to negotiate with the state over what they're doing. We're going to have to consider which initiatives, if we wanted to change something about how Junction Village is deeded, that's gonna take us right back to the state. If we want more discharge from the wastewater treatment facility, that's gonna take us right back to the state. So what's useful for us is to understand what seems to rise to the top in terms of goals from both of these groups, so that we can put that into the mix of the things that we are going to have to negotiate with in order to achieve some results for the town.
Yeah, I think Mark's point, actually, all the points have just been made. I think that there are clearly some uncertainties that will become increasingly known over time. And I think what our challenge is right now is to sort of look at things both from the goals perspective, but also looking at, which is what we did in our last meeting. What are the aspects of the site that are sort of almost like givens? So for example, if we ultimately decide as a town that we want to try to take advantage of that wastewater treatment, it makes economic sense and everything else. As soon as one makes that decision, there's corresponding reverberations from that, right? You don't necessarily want to put certain programmatic uses right next to a sewer treatment plant. And so there are opportunities within that to begin to think about some of these other municipal uses, which to John's point, we have been thinking about. So it's just a little bit of, stutter stepping.
So I would like to give also a MCI advisory board a chance to ask us. And through we were grilling you a little bit. So you have any questions for us?
Just, so you told us DPW needs 13 acres. What's the acreage of fire and police need?
We are right now, so we just started with the subgroups, so we have 3 subgroups. Public Works, which couldn't meet yet because, and one element was that Scott resigned and he was in that group. Then we had the other 2 subgroups are fire, looking at fire and police. And one is looking purely of consolidation of the different municipal locations. Is there a scenario where we can move offices in one area and free up other areas and what can be done there? On that, you wanna?
Just a footnote too, I think, and Judith could speak to this much more eloquently and informed than I could, but. You know, one of the things that, so Sven, Judith and I happen to be on the public safety subgroup. And so one of the questions we're trying to ask is, well, what is our projected population in 5 or 10 years? What sort of services? You know, if you go to Sudbury, or I forget which town just built this sort of their sort of state-of-the-art police station, what does a functioning, reasonable, like must-have police station look like? How many square feet is it? How many officers is it? What does it support? Doing the same thing for fire. I mean, with the growth of West Concord, they're gonna need a fire station, and they're gonna need expansion. And there aren't a ton of options. But, you know, so maybe Jim, you can jump in, but part of what we're trying to do is get the data to make informed decisions and say, you know what, 10 towns just built police stations. You know, for every 500 people, you need 1 officer, 1 car, whatever that could is. We don't know. Right? The chiefs are gonna come in and make presentations, but I suspect there could be sort of some nice to haves in their requests, and unfortunately, it's part of the process to figure out what will fit reasonably the town and what we can afford. Does fire get split from DPW from police? Maybe. Does a water and, you know, and DPW get split from Kai's Road? Maybe. I think, Sven, you can talk to this,
Yeah.
but philosophically, I think we're trying to figure out what are all the options, good ones, bad ones, what have you. That's why I keep pounding away at Junction Village. Maybe, you know, based on what Keith said, maybe that's not a very good solution. But we're just trying to figure out what are the pieces that reasonably fit before we start casting them away, because I think one of the things we're gonna try to do is just start getting rid of the low hanging fruit. You know, for example, this parcel just doesn't make sense for these functions, so we're not gonna talk about that anymore.
I was, one comment on the uses that, one of the themes that was really important to us as we looked at potential uses, and you know, you're saying, why did you have municipal use in kind of your more prominently kind of appearing in our scenarios? One of the things we were trying to do was to get to a scenario that would be kind of net positive from a tax standpoint. We wanted to get to a point where there's a mix of uses that generates more cash to the town every year than it costs to support it. That was one reason that we, I think, would say we're leaning against, we'll find out on Tuesday, but I can say personally, that was one reason why I lean against having an extensive municipal use there, only because it would make it very hard to have it be tax, you know, net tax positive for the town. Now, it may prove to be that, well, that's just not a realistic outcome. But in light of all the other tax increases we're facing, wouldn't it be nice if we weren't further burdening taxpayers?
So we have here queued up, it's Keith, Judith, and Mary's.
Just to follow up on John's comment that, and I think it should be said that the land use working group is not the municipal facilities working group. That's not our name. That there are 2 phases, and you'll love phase 2, and I can't wait till we get there. And I mean, really, I am quite frustrated with how long it's gonna take us to get to phase 2. But that will address other potential uses, including commercial development, housing and recreation, and open space. And your focus, the MCI Concord is focusing on the revenue generators. Now, I understand what of all the building blocks and pieces that are in your report. What rises to the top are the things that produce additional income for the community. We care about that too, it says, but first we're going to figure out how to spend millions of dollars that I don't know what's in the plan? How much is it gonna cost to undertake, the municipal facilities? I think that needs to be an important, part of what we're doing. But we're not just the municipal facilities part. The phase that says, well, trying to figure out the first part of where these facilities should go, and then and only then look up commercial development and other things. And that seems to be at odds with what your approach was. You're looking from the get-go of how can we bring in more money, and we're not.
Not yet.
And maybe we can come to agreement on how best to approach.
So next is Judith and then Mary. Judith?
Thank you, Sven. So first off, just in quick response to Keith's commentary, I think perhaps at our next meeting, we might review our charge to be very clear on what it is the group is doing. I think the name is a little bit confusing. So we can discuss that perhaps in our next working group. I did want to reference, I thought Mark covered a lot of the municipal facilities conversation fairly well with respect to public safety in particular. I know, I'm sorry, I can't actually see who is whom on Zoom with regard to the MCI Advisory Board, but somebody mentioned something about 13 acres. And I just wanted to be clear and careful about specifying particular amounts of land with regard to the wastewater treatment facility. I think that's premature. I think we know what the existing site area is for the wastewater treatment plant, including the sand pits. But in terms of an additional carve out, that might include access, but might include additional public works components. That could be outdoor surface storage, it could be outbuildings, it could be something else. I don't think we have a count on that yet. So I just want to be careful about the 13 acres, because I know that for the MCI group, thinking about their pro forma, as you're trying to, cover $50 million in state costs and drive that through your RFP, that would make you a little bit nervous. So we understand that, and we just want to be careful about starting to put numbers on things when we don't actually have those resolved yet.
Mary?
Thank you, Sven. I want to go back to John's comment earlier about how the MCI Advisory Board went forward with the goal of making this, whatever they recommend, net revenue positive. And that is absolutely true. That was something that I was a strong advocate for, and that's what they did. And what that meant is it limited the amount of area that's available for municipal uses. And that's an absolutely true fact. The fact that they were focused just on one parcel, which is MCI, now we've got a broader focus. And if we as the land use working group or the select board or wherever this decision ends up being put on their table, is if we can still meet the goal of being net revenue positive for the town and move some municipal uses to MCI and to move housing to places that are now municipal uses like DPW, we can still meet the principle that we put in front of the MCI Advisory Board, but we're just taking a broader view. So I just want to say that I'm so glad that the MCI Advisory Board took that goal seriously and put together something that looked within the confines of a particular piece of land. And now we've got to look broader than that. And it would be silly to say, oh no, we're just going to stick with MCI and ignore the fact that we've got other pieces in play. So I guess they did really the job that the MCI Advisory Board did is phenomenal. And our job is to look at what they did and integrate it into broader pieces at play.
Yeah, back to Keith's remark about phase one and phase two. I think our work is straddling the two in real time. At least it is in my brain, because in talking about MCI and talking with the advisory group, I'm also thinking what is not appropriate, but what is a better use? I mean, is this, even though our initial goal is the municipal public safety DPW needs, could we rule out MCI because they're better uses, or to shoehorn some of those into this the space, including Junction Village, is that a bad idea? So, you know, that, this is good in thinking. What should we do at the site? And in my mind, you know, these municipal uses that we're talking about are, other than the wastewater treatment plant, which is to me sort of a no-brainer, the town needs that. I think it's a tough fit. Haven't decided there yet, but I'm just saying, as we talk through what's good for the site, I'm also thinking, Keith, about, you know, phase two. And the revenue generation, as Mary said, I think is a primary need for this site and for the town. And we're not gonna get that through these public safety, so I'm freewheeling what's going through my mind as I'm talking about what can we do with this site and what's not appropriate at this site.
The one more, I try to wrap it up, so you get it.
Just between these two groups or any other group, is there any plan to do any kind of land appraisals that would value the current municipal sites? And then conversely, what would it cost to basically, I assume, take by eminent domain property that you need that is large enough to accommodate these various municipal needs? And how do you weigh all that versus economic development? And over what period of time might that balance out, if at all?
You just touched on one of the small tasks we have.
Doesn't sound small.
No, therefore quotation marks. No, I think it's, given the time, I think it was good to have this first exchange. I think it's great when you have you, Linda, officially seated and being interfaced. But I think it must be clear is, I think we should not and don't want to slow you down in your work, and you're going ahead. But what I could imagine is that between the co-chairs of both groups, we are synchronizing on timetables and seeing where it might make sense. Again, where the points where either subgroups or whatever can come together and talk about specific ideas or specific scenarios that might affect each other. So that we have some kind of informal connection or formal between the co-chairs to synchronize the work streams and making sure that you're not kind of running completely in silos, and 4 or 6 months from now, we all say, oh my God.
I had a specific suggestion about that. I know that leadership from the MCI advisory board meets with the town's team that meets with DCAM, is that correct? Can we have our co-chairs of the land use working group be part of that team? I think it would be useful. This is a question really to the select board, because it's a select board's call. But I think that in order for us to figure out what the future looks like, we need to know 2 things. We need to know what the select board wants to do, and we need to know what the state wants to do, and that the rest of us can govern ourselves accordingly. And help carry that out, and maybe the way that starts is by having representation at the table for the working group as well.
So, and take a. Sure. So Linda is started as of this past Friday, participating in the bi-weekly PK meetings for precisely that purpose, and since she'll be the liaison, she can tell what, how to spend her time, but there's an opportunity for that channel of communication to open up. I leave it to Mark and other members of the select board to respond to your question.
Yeah, one of the things that we try to do in that meeting is focus on what do we need from DCAM, what does DCAM need from us, kind of things. So that we're talking about, and what progress are they making and where are they in the process, so that we get a sense. And I do think we can work on that to try to make sure that process is usefully flowing to you guys. Yes.
Mark, who's in charge of messaging, packaging to the voters? So ultimately, when there is town meeting vote, I think it would be interesting or important to have renderings. I think it would have specificity, how much commercial, how much housing, how much open space. So just who's in charge of that pitch, putting that together?
Well, I mean, clearly the ultimate recommendation is gonna come from the select board, and we're gonna do that. I think the MCI advisory board is well organized, and John's the leader of our public community outreach subgroup. And they're the ones that working with agency, put together the website, put together the public engagement process, and I think that. Even in the last time we discussed this, we thought that this next version, I'm calling it scenario 2.0, this hybrid scenario that's built on better information than was created for the 3 scenarios that were in the original report. I think that we're going to be discussing how to socialize that, how to get feedback on it, how to, test that, and rerunning something that's gonna look a little bit like what we did in the spring to begin to get some momentum behind that and make sure that everybody understands it. And then that will inform what goes into an actual zoning process. Is that kind of? I didn't want to go too far out.
No, that's good.
That's pretty much where we are.
All right. So you made first contact.
Yeah.
One more comment.
One more comment, okay.
I think that it is so vital that these two
Yeah.
committees be attached together. I could even imagine at some point in the future, it might make sense to consolidate them. But not, I think, until we finish kind of our handoff recommendations, but there's gotta be such type of coordination, because it's really, we share the same ultimate goal, which is to see the town have facilities and needs, whether they're municipal facilities or housing, et cetera, and doing that in the most tax efficient way, let's say. So I think, again, there's gonna be a ton of overlap between what you're thinking about and what we're thinking about. We should have these committees a lot.
Yeah.
Unless you're
That's
then
just
one bandwidth.
So you didn't, weren't referring to me as the hip in any.
Okay, so I try, is it
Super quick.
super quick?
Super.
Okay,
John, is there a data repository that MCI advisory committees, does it have it? So for example, when I think about, school population in general, water, one of the things we were talking about, Alan, is that in the future, not only is processing waste gonna be important, but actually getting fresh water to people is gonna be important, 10 or 20 years out. And so how do we make it as efficient as possible that we're looking at common quality data?
So we don't have a repository of that per se. A lot of that would appear in the report that agency pulled together. It's possible that agency has that, but they haven't handed that over to us. We've worked out an arrangement whereby we can continue to hire agency on a month-to-month basis to perform certain tasks, but right now they are revamping the website to make it easy to access and digest the recommendations in their report. I could imagine you could actually find out if they are sitting on top of a repository, whether we could get that transferred to us.
okay,
Mark, in the report, it lays out if they build the 240Bs, and we've got 98 units of housing capacity left, a student capacity left in the school system. So there are those numbers, they've done that research, you just have to go through and parse it out, but it's there.
Very
Okay.
robust exhibit addendum section. It's about 4 or 5 times the size of the report.
yeah, I think there's a whole data discussion. And I don't want to go on this rabbit hole, but I think it's a good point. If you want to share or whatever, whatever you did. That whatever we can reuse better, and we're not reinventing it. So I really try to get through the agenda.
I have one last question that you. Appreciate it. Just that, we're talking about some scenarios here, things that, I'd like to know how DCAM and the state feel about the idea that some things that DCAM was predisposed to seeing at MCI, how would they feel about some of those uses being elsewhere on current town-owned property in return for, whatever it is the town wants to have happen at MCI. And if that's possible to do, that gives us a lot of building blocks to shoot for. If some uses could go on the former site of the public works, then maybe Public Works can shift over to some degree to MCI. If that's even possible for what, the state and DCAM are thinking. If it's not, I think the sooner we know that, the better it will be.
Okay. All
I
good?
don't have a question.
Okay, no hand up online. Good.
Kidding.
All right, so with that,
I'll just briefly address what Keith just mentioned though, which is, we've been pretty open about the fact that we're running this land use working group, that we're thinking about trade-offs for use of land, and certainly it hasn't been ruled out in any discussion that we've had yet with DCAM. That doesn't mean they're bought in, I'm not making any kind of commitments, but they know what we're trying to get at here. And, I think if we keep these two efforts working with some pace and some urgency, we're going to find that we can build on the dialogue that we're having with DCAM when we do that.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next agenda item, debrief of
Thanks for all you do.
other site tours, and given that we haven't really discussed MCI, we just a debrief on our site tours. And see is what our impressions were, self-guided tours people took. We have definitely one outstanding on the Ripley side, and I'm looking over to Shannon. Is there anything on Ripley scheduled yet, or?
No, I think Tracy and I were supposed to connect about scheduling that, and we haven't yet.
Yeah, the sooner the better, because we try to get as much of this groundwork done.
Ben,
as
you
fast as
asked a
possible.
question earlier whether it'd be beneficial to have summaries. Like was put together at MCI, I think it would be very beneficial.
Yeah.
Probably after we.
Yeah, it's probably MCI is the biggest one, and others are a little bit smaller than that, but it's probably, yeah.
Yes, maybe.
Yeah. Okay, so. What did you see? Well, where do you left with? What were your thoughts, surprises?
Peabody, or sort of Peabody?
Here we have Peabody, Main Street, self-guided tours you went.
I'll start with Peabody. Shannon and I did a separate tour, and interestingly, Dan Pettit from Council on Aging was there as well.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that there are a lot of municipal eyes looking at that building. I think it's terrific possibilities, just a lot of space. It's not in town center, which is probably the only, when I asked Russ what was negative in this building, he said location. But I think as far as space, the condition of the building, the fact that the interior walls are movable. It does have a price tag with renovation, but the staging, especially consolidation of municipal employees. I think it's a great location for that, but I think that's just the tip of the iceberg, because it's a lot more space than just consolidation of municipal employees. And the fact that Council on Aging is looking at it, interesting. The domino effect of freeing up other buildings as pieces move would be very interesting, freeing up Harvey Wheeler with a Council on Aging moves to Peabody, although that's not directly in our mission. That kind of came up, so I think we'd be freeing up a lot of other buildings by putting things to Peabody. Peabody is a very suitable location for a lot of municipal activities. That's just, I thought, wasn't, in my mind, any downside other than the fact exactly where it is. And the schools that Tracy's not here, but moving personnel from Ripley over to Peabody. We have one end of town to the other, closer to the middle school, so it's just lots of possibilities, I think, that are open in my mind.
So Paul, so one of the things I found interesting is that, I felt with MCI and Peabody, sort of certain municipal groups have already moved in. They're like, we love this. And so I guess it's just staying on what you just said, if we free up Harvey Wheeler, who's doing the analysis to say, okay, we're freeing that up, what are we gonna do with it? We're gonna sell it, we're gonna, we have 18 buildings, we don't need 18. I mean, there's a thesis that says, we should just lease office space. So I guess my question is that, if it's free, which nothing's free. You know, PV is super attractive, I mean, new windows, new boilers, new whatever, but there's a cost to it, and I'm just wondering. You know, when we start again, potentially we have 18 now, maybe 20 pieces of this puzzle. I don't see how it makes sense of this puzzle from an ROI perspective, and I hate to use that word, but. I think at some point we start talking about freeing up, disposing of, we gotta start thinking about ROI.
And we are,
Part of the subgroup. The subgroup on consolidation looks through, I would expect that there's also the recommendation, what to do with the freed up space. Is this something that can generate revenue for the cost or not? Or to your case, is it actually cheaper to rent? Yeah.
we haven't done an analysis, I've just, you know, a brief discussion with Russ about maintenance costs, the savings on maintenance of 14 buildings versus one. So, I mean, that's one saving. What to do with the other buildings, lease them, save them. And I don't want, at this point, we're not dismissing the leasing possibility, municipal leasing, because there's office space, so I'm just saying, we're reflecting on PV, just as interesting possibilities, that was my. I did not rule that out for a lot of this consolidation.
I just think the lens I've been using, or the lens I wanna use is just, you know, must have. So when I go through the police station, it's must have. I go DPW, close to must have. So I think at some point. We're gonna have to get 18 properties down to a much smaller number.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have to say, you know what, it's great that a whole bunch of people, including municipal employees, want X, Y, and Z. Doesn't fit with the balancing act we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think it's, at the moment we're in the phase, getting the information, getting the ideas, getting the work groups up and running, that they can do these analysis, and then when we bring these things step by step together. We have to refine and say, okay, this is the information that is missing, we have to do this, or we are prioritizing and in a certain way. I think one thing I'm concerned is that just because we walk into a building and we suddenly love it. Yeah, that we are not falling into some kind of a mental shortcut solution. And not stepping back to scenarios like you mentioned, or potentially others, to say, what about we are not using this building and we are zoning it completely different and selling it and then getting significant revenue for the town? What is another scenario? What can we do? Or
Yeah.
If Harvey Wheeler is free, what do we do with Harvey Wheeler? Could that be this place for the new fire station? I don't know. Yeah.
Well, you know, the municipal subgroup, Mary said, yeah, we have work to do on this, I'm just saying, this building.
Yeah.
But what we cannot do in this building is have a fire station, a police station, or DPW, right? So this building is either used for municipal purposes, or it could be housing, or it could sell the building, I mean, those are other possibilities.
So on my tour, so I mirror a little bit, I was positively surprised by the quality of the core of Peabody. So that is definitely a plus. I would love to see Ripley and see what that means and what potentially we have to deal with there. I was a bit surprised on the 2229 Main, and I definitely have to go back to that study and scratch and see a sort of. I scratched a little in my head, what the hell do we put there? But I have to read that thing again. So there's still a lot going on, and then looking back to some of the tours we had, I'm getting a bit concerned about kind of the timeline when which thing is coming online and not online. And I believe we will have to accept that, similar to what we had in a discussion before here with the MCI group, is that we will have to make recommendations not 100% knowing the timelines and the chain of events. And it might be that we are ending up with kind of a few scenarios, depending on what is happening where, that there's kind of not the one big solution for everything, but that there might be some options depending on the timelines and the cost.
Right, I think if you ask the question, would anyone put municipal facilities at MCI? I think everyone would say, if we had the choice, no. Right, no one's saying yes. But I think we're just, again, Concord just doesn't have that much free land. We don't have enough free areas to put all the puzzle pieces in. So the only reason why I'm talking about River Junction or Junction Village and potentially how MCI fits and is it, at the end of the day, we're probably gonna make recommendations. We're being forced to make because there are really no alternatives and there are must-haves, so.
Let me just talk about 2229, because as far as timing, negotiations just starting in the select board. The physical acquisition of that site, signing of the papers probably can't happen until 2029. But making a decision, select board making a decision whether to proceed or not can happen probably within a couple of years. But part of that decision would be, what are we gonna do there? So the planning for that has to take place over the next couple of years, so it's part of the decision. I don't know, Mark, whether that's an unsuitable place for DPW or not. I mean, you keep coming back to traffic and it's traffic is increasing. I live in that part of town. There's a lot of housing there. But it's a big open space. You can put anything there. You can put anything there in that open space. But it's only a question of what the greatest needs are in that part of town. I'm not sure you can put DPW there. I'm not gonna look Alan. I'm not gonna make eye contact with Alan when I say that, but you know, it's you can get 15 acres, you get 15 acres there.
Yeah, I definitely have to read this thing in paper again. Yeah, again, the same here, you put a lot of work in there. And that could be not just sitting shelf. Other impressions from site tours? Online? With Judith or Mary, you wanna chime in on?
Sure.
Yeah,
I'll chime in. Yeah, I went and toured the Council on Aging, and I also went over to 55 Church Street, which is a lot of admin space over there. Both of these buildings are, the staff there has made it nice. There's a lot of nooks and crannies, but we have to remember that neither of these spaces were designed for what they're being used for. So the staff has kind of made do. I think if we move those over to Peabody, to me, that's something we should think about seriously. My concern about Peabody, and I've heard this from other people when I talk to people out in the community, is we need to think about communicating why a building that wasn't good enough for the schools is acceptable for municipal services, including maybe senior services or maybe the carousel. So we need to think about communicating, you know, what is the remediation we're going to do over at Peabody if we're going to think seriously about moving. There's a lot of square footage over there. There's a lot of potential. I think there's a lot of, at least from my conversations with the staff, they're open to moving over there because, like I said, they're kind of making do with where they are now. But we need to think about what our messaging is to the community, and we need to think carefully about the remediation that we're going to be doing there.
okay. Judith, do you wanna add something?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to, I mean, I think I share a lot of the impressions that my fellow working group members have already shared. I think one of the things that has made an impression on me is how little we understand these sites, frankly, from a reuse point of view, how little we understand the needs of our different departments in town, from folks sitting in the assessor's office to Council on Aging to Public Works. And I think that we really need to make a point of engaging our town staff in our conversations going forward so that we can begin to collect some of this information, mainly because I think there's been an absence of master planning around municipal offices, around public works, frankly, around public safety. There's been a lack of master planning going forward, which is no critique, by the way, of our existing staff who are overtaxed with the responsibilities that they currently have. But I do want to encourage the working group to engage the municipal staff as we move forward in trying to put some of these pieces together. It is complicated. There are a lot of moving parts. There are a lot of impressions of activity and function that are not paired with evidence of activities and functions. So we are really hard pressed to have the data and evidence that we need to start making arguments about some of these changes. I think Mary's point about Peabody and community impressions about the school is a perfect example of that. One other thing I would mention really quickly is, in the construction industry, there's a quick rule of thumb about renovation versus building new, which feeds into Mark's comments about thinking about how the buildings function financially from an ROI point of view. And the general rule is that if it costs more than 60% to build new of the existing building or renovating the existing building, that it often makes sense to build new. So if the cost of renovation is more than 60% of building new, then build new. From a life cycle point of view, it generally makes sense to have a new building. So we can take that kind of a metric, and obviously it changes depending on the type of building and the circumstance, but we could certainly use that metric in the context of Peabody, just looking at it from a financial or construction cost point of view, and say that probably if it's $400 or $500 a square foot to renovate, and I think renovation, by the way, Mary, would be a key aspect of how we make this more suitable for town staff as a potential future use. But we compare that to the construction cost of building new, which I think everybody at this meeting knows those costs have climbed very, very rapidly due to both inflation and the current political environment around construction material tariffs. So just a quick rule of thumb that I think is helpful for everyone to know.
Thank you. Mark?
So not quite sure. So I just want to read comments on MCI.
Yeah.
I mean, I've written a couple letters on behalf of, various committees and groups, and, sort of, I think once in a generation is a huge understatement. I mean, the ability to be, sort of contiguous, adjacent on Route 2, if Route 2 is ever fixed the way it should be fixed. The ability to put commercial there, the ability to, it's so large to put industrial and other uses near, maybe not so, wonderful, some odors or what have you from the wastewater. They're fabulous opportunities, and so, wholeheartedly agree with John and Mary as far as making it is much of a commercial win as possible. And it's a massive site. When you think about the size of it, I was at some meeting, to just go to the new Maynard crossing, that's how big it is. It's enormous. So, the ability to creatively put some uses that don't really exist in Concord, or uses that people may not find, maybe Amazon warehousing may not be everyone's, first choice, but the rent's great and the building would be tucked away in a corner, and, there are plenty of opportunity to hide things, not in a nefarious way, but to make things blend that no other parcels in Concord even come close to. So I do commend John for reminding us all that, the commercial aspect of making it tax positive is the guiding light. And the only reason why I'm asking, some of the questions I'm asking is because of sort of taken to heart, some of the things we're doing in our subcommittee as far as finding solutions to very difficult problems. And, when you walk around, you see that, the dispatch and the police station has been flooded. And they're now operating on the third floor. That's a huge problem. And by the way, they're next to, basically, a river or a wetland that floods.
Yeah.
So hard thing to deal with.
I think it's just on so on the MCI, my impression again, same is huge. Yeah, but again, 99% of that is covered by the current advisory group. I think is what I was more really kind of around the wastewater treatment facility and the sand pits facility, understanding that, potentially getting access to the sand pits adds another, let's say, 150,000 gallons a day. You can do the math, this is 1,300 potential, bedrooms, and capacity. And also knowing that just 30% of the town is on sewer, this is a huge opportunity. Also with the potential price tag, it's manageable to add that. So that was one thing, is that we have to potentially just see it larger than just the facility itself, but plus the sand pits. And then comes the question of the, how you call it, the stinky zone. It's like, how much setback you need to have, what's the access? So what is the minimum footprint that is needed, given the town strategically needs the water facility no matter what? If the water facility is not theirs, I think it's economically not really feasible for developer to do it. And then if it goes away, developer has no chance to develop. So with the water treatment facility plus the sand pit, we enable much more development of the town. So if we figure out the minimum footprint that is needed, minimum setback access, and then the question is what can fit on the minimum footprint, and then making a potential kind of marginal, what is marginal needed to potentially put in there more as a second scenario, and see what the trade-offs are. That might be the way to leave that side.
Well, no, I mean, it's just, so I sit on behalf of the Economic Vitality Committee, and it's our top 2 or 3 issue impediment to future development for Concord. And like you, I think philosophically, it's, although we're interested in cost, the first intellectual exercise we're trying to do is look at the data, find out what the options are, throw everything on the table, and then understand where relatively we are in cost. It's in very recent memory, we just, authorized $50 million of spending for PFAS and NEGOG, and it's a ugly, horrible number, but the reality is, I think that at the end of the day, we should be looking at all of our options, a little bit price dependent at this point, and then figure out the.
Yeah, sort of. Commercial development, high priority. I don't think we should discount the ability of 2229 to support significant commercial opportunity. Whatever goes on there, have a separate septic system. It's not to be connected to any wastewater, if it's housing, if it's commercial, if it's municipal, it's gonna be a septic system. So I wouldn't discount that an additional commercial development opportunity or housing. There's a lot of housing in that part of town. Okay, so it's probably maybe not the best use to put more housing, but small housing development there, a commercial development, that's, I can certainly support it.
So I think, I'm not, I thought that 229 Main Street Committee was disbanded. Is it now like a phoenix coming up? It should come up again, right?
That's why
It's-
Right, so,
There's a reuse report and there's advisory report. There's no committee anymore.
the only feedback,
There's a technical advisory looking at the remediation, but as far as.
so the only feedback I would
You're looking
offer
at here.
is that I've heard from a number of real estate brokers, it's just not the place for commercial development. So you or some carnation of sort of the group, I think needs to get the real estate developer, real estate agent information, because the information I've heard for the last 2 or 3 years has been not desirable. And I'm not judging, and I hate to sour it, but I've never heard of one person to say, I put retail there, I put commercial there, I put, it's just.
Why not the fulfillment center that we talked about for MCI? I think 2229 Main Street would be a much more appropriate, it would be much better to be in a site where we didn't see it versus one where, and need not see it, as opposed to being like this, the showpiece or the centerpiece for MCI. I would not want to see housing on 2229 Main Street. I think the branding would be awful, to say, hey, this is a contaminated waste site. Come live here. And I think it's substantially different that if it's on the property that has been, where deep below are nuclear materials. You
have to read the report. Okay.
Well,
as
I
far as
heard-
where the nuclear material.
I
You have to
heard what,
understand that there are areas of that site that were never
Yeah.
contaminated, significant acreage.
Yeah.
So I'd say, before you discount.
well, I heard what.
Read the
I
report.
heard what the guy who's managing the cleanup says, and it's, that it's a difficult branding exercise, to put residences there. Just think of poltergeist. That,
He's an
that-
engineer.
so. And when I'm here as the, on the working group as the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust rep, and so when I'm looking at the various sites. Many are eye-opening and I'm in my head, I'm jumping ahead to phase 2 of where we put housing, actually either phase 2 or the completed work, soon to be completed work of MCI. And sites that are within walking distance of a place would be my preferences for where we put housing. That could mean former municipal facilities that are in the downtown area. Or in West Concord and I think when you put all the pieces together. That and this is why I raised the issue about what will DCAM go for. If putting not as much housing at MCI is okay with DCAM, if say the town puts housing at Harvey Wheeler or puts it at the dry part of Kai's Road. If those are doable things, that produces some good options and is worth having a conversation about.
Okay,
But that's
Yeah.
right. This committee needs to get very familiar.
yes.
With the reality of 2229 Main Street. And what it's gonna be when it's cleaned up. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, that was, I translate, I'll go back and read this, inclusive me, again, with a fresh eye, with the impressions and the information from the tour. And then, we might have a separate discussion to understand and get a better download from you or whoever you think might be helpful
Just
to
one
understand
comment.
it, yes.
And that is, I think in the past, Concord has fallen victim to telling. Dictating uses, dictating things where I don't think that's the correct path. So we may have our own personal opinions as to what would fit there. So the only thing I would request is that as a next step, talk to brokers, talk to developers. And let's get some sort of independent, objective, outside opinion. And I may not agree with you that, there are all sorts of uses on capped waste facilities all over the country.
Yeah.
And I just don't think we need to fall victim to trying to tell people.
And that is not.
I'm not telling anybody anything. I'm just.
No,
saying-
no, I'm saying you are. I'm just saying as a town, I think we.
And the first step is for us to
The
get.
market will dictate what gets built, period, after we've done all the zoning and acquired all the properties. The market is gonna decide what gets built there, so the sooner, as Mark says, the sooner we ask the market, what do you think? I think we'll be making informed
And
decisions.
that's not only singularity for 2229 Main, but also for
For
other
everything.
properties, yeah?
For
So
everything.
if you think about scenarios on
What does the market wanna
Peabody,
do with
for
Peabody?
Ripley or others, or Harvey Wheeler, that we understand what that market is.
And I think there is a rich pool of brokers and developers and real estate people in our community. Who would be willing to provide some input, and if people don't necessarily like the input, we can broaden the circle but. I think it would make sense to get a sense as to, is there resistance, is there support? Earlier than later.
I think it's a good time to go to the updated work plan and how we bring all of these, and we always have this period in this committee where we start brainstorming and going scenarios it's good, we need to do this, but then we have to bring it into the work streams. So, Judith, you wanna take a lead on that?
Sure, I'll try and do it quickly because I realize we are very close to the end of our meeting time. I just wanted to provide an updated deck on the work plan and to indicate, actually, even though it's felt like a lot of running in different directions and trying to familiarize ourselves with all of these different properties and existing reports and so forth, but we're actually pushing forward. So this is the updated deck. It was circulated to all of the working group members. The discussion that we had the last time we met was really about forming the subgroups. Next slide, please, Shannon. And then we also looked at our timeline. And I do want to note that I changed the colors from green to blue so that Sven
Thank you.
could read them, right? For all of our colorblind committee members. So the idea here that nothing really has changed from the previous ideas about how we're going to spend the year that we've been given according to the select board charge. But just some refined wording. Next slide, please, Shannon. All right, so we have formed our subgroups. I think this is good for everybody to see, and the member allocation, just to remind folks who's in what group. And then presuming that Linda Miller, welcome, Linda gets nominated and that is approved, then Linda would be joining the Public Works Facilities group. Next slide, please. And then I just wanted to highlight, one of the things that we do when we're trying to construct a work plan is to begin with the end in mind, which tries to integrate what the report might look like with the work that we're doing. So if we had a report that had, say, sections that started with our charge and the nature of the problem and why now and what was our work plan design, then our subgroup findings and our full group integrated findings would really form the meat of that report in terms of the analysis. So that phase 1 and phase 2 are really the main types of work that we're doing. That's just a refresh. Next slide, please. And then, of course, we're currently in phase 1. And I did want to clarify that phase 1 and phase 2 in the work plan don't necessarily completely coincide with phase 1 and phase 2, which is the language of the charge. So just being clear that this is language about the work plan specifically. So in phase 1 in our prior presentation, we walked through these 5 steps, like starting with a needs assessment and actually identifying metrics, which is something we're working on, creating a total inventory of sites, and then working through a short list all the way to recommendations in a report. I have summarized this into a task list for the public safety work group. Next slide, please. And this might be useful for the other groups to adapt. I'm happy to share. But the idea that each of these tasks has a series of particular tasks included within it. A great example is talking to commercial real estate brokers about, regional property demand, Concord local demand for specific types of uses and so forth. That would be an element of this task 1 list. And then also keeping in mind that the work that we're doing is iterative. So even though it presents as linear, like we do 1 and then move on to 2, in fact, it's highly iterative. But in the public safety group, we're kind of in steps 1 and 2, and then hoping to move forward into a short list of sites that seem to make some sense in September or October, and then moving from there. But if that's something that folks would like to see, we can share.
And you make it sure that this is available in a readable format. Yeah.
Yes, I have a document, a Google Drive document that I'm happy to share. This is just for the purposes of course, of the slide deck for today. Next slide, please. And then as we move from a long list of sites to a short list from the perspective of our subgroup, there's lots of data we can draw from. So this is just an example. Circulated today was the updated property master list, which has more detailed information on each of the sites. So each of you should have received a link to that. It's in the resource folder. You can identify it because the color scheme is a little bit different. That's the file on the bottom. Again, it's not anticipated that you'd be able to read it in a slide presentation. But in addition to that, we can make use of our property profiles, which we can discuss whether or not those are useful. So we had the property profile for the wastewater treatment plant at MCI Concord. We have additional information. Some of these graphics are pulled from the very excellent, by the way, MCI Vision Report appendices, which I encourage everybody in the working group to take a look at. There's all kinds of great data in there. And then, of course, Town GIS and other, real estate databases. So you can make use of these kinds of reports and data in order to go from a long list to a short list of, in the case of the public safety group, we're looking at sites and trying to identify sites that might work for a fire station, police station, and so forth. Different working groups have different perspectives on.
Yeah, let me give you a little, a little special mark here is Judith did a lot of work in using the original property list as provided by the town and expanding it with additional information that are in different sources, in databases she has in our GIS, in appendixes to the MCI, and having a very comprehensive document. There might be still additional things you want to see there, but I would encourage every member of this group to really take the time and digest this list. I know it's a lot, but you probably come back and learn a lot, and then we'll probably come back with even more questions. But we try to just get these things really condensed. So, like Judith said, that in the end we can narrow the long list down to a short list.
Yeah, thank you, Sven. That was a nice thing to say. I must say I enjoyed putting the data together, and I should a shout out to Shannon and Megan, who actually provided the skeleton for this and a lot of the preliminary data. One of the key things that we're trying to do with the data is to get to what we call concordance in data analytics, which is a term that implies agreement. So that if I were to talk to Elizabeth or Alyssa in the planning department, that they would be using the same data, for example, on population projections that would be used by MCI or by the school board. So the idea that we have concordance is one of the reasons why we have these documents, so that when everybody reviews them, including the staff, we know that our numbers are correct when we make future recommendations. I think that's pretty much it. The next slide, I think, is just a refresher on phase 2, and we can talk more about that in a future meeting. I think, as Keith points out, that we have to really think about managing what it is phase 2 is going to involve. And then there are some other things in the deck about evaluation matrices and stuff. I'm just holding those in the back of the deck in case working group members want to refer to those slides. But in the sense of thinking about our work plan, this slide deck is updated, and I think the idea is we would continue to update the slide deck with the work plan as we move forward, and then change it as needed as people make suggestions about different paths and so forth. So that is the end of my overview of the work plan update, Sven.
Thank you. There's a lot
Thank
of
you.
thumbs up here. And then Judith said this was a lot of work done by Judith, so thank you so much. So on the subcommittees, perhaps you can keep it quite short, because I think the status is one subcommittee hasn't met yet, which is Public Works 1. And then the 2 others just had their initial meeting, and perhaps you just have kind of 2 to 3 minutes each on summarizing what was done. But Mike, you want to take the summary on what we did, or?
No.
No. Judith, as you were the minute taker, perhaps you talk about our subcommittee.
Oh, very quickly. Our subcommittee has, as I said, worked on better understanding what sites might be appropriate for, in particular, public safety needs. And that is, of course, mainly fire and police stations. We're undertaking 2 activities right now. One is we are meeting with the police chief and fire chief, I believe, this week. To have a conversation about their impressions. I'm sure they've thought about this a lot more so than certainly I have in the month and a half that I've been involved on this committee. So we definitely want to hear from them. The second thing is that we are doing some benchmarking, which is looking at peer municipalities and trying to understand the condition and capacity of their public safety facilities, their approach to planning. For example, do they have a central facility and just one, or do they have a central facility that might combine police and fire and then a satellite fire station, so on and so forth. So I would say those are our 2 main activities. We are data gathering.
Dates, times,
So the minutes, you will circulate that for the next meeting of the subgroup.
No, for the meetings for the chiefs.
Oh, no, do you have the dates already?
It's this Friday.
This Friday?
Yeah, 3 o'clock.
Did you didn't send yet something?
No, I think I did.
Oh, you did? Okay. Not sure, okay. Oh, no, there it is, I found it, yeah. Sorry, it's in my other calendar. Then on the,
Municipal group,
municipal group,
Mary, do you want to take a crack at summarizing or should I?
You should, you were the chair, remember?
Oh, gee, yeah. Well, we just got started. We started with the facilities assessment plan and with a list of all the properties, and we crossed off a few where either, for example, we want to identify the properties that were suitable for consolidation, where things could be moved to. So we basically asked the question, how many buildings are in play for staff consolidation? How many staff, we got information on town staff from Megan. You put that together in a pivot table, we have a really good idea of who is where and what departments. So of the total number 350, not all of those are subject to consolidation, because a lot of them are public safety, DPW, that are being handled by other CM groups. We looked at possible consolidation sites, Peabody being one of them, possibility of MCI, we talked about possibility of leasing. So we're just going through the sites where people can be moved out of. And instead of saying the sites where they can be moved into, that's kind of where we are at this point. I think we have a meeting tomorrow. We'll be discussing, I think, Peabody and others in greater detail, having been at that site. So I think we have the data we need on the town side. I haven't seen the data on the Ripley side yet, because part of the question is, can Ripley staff be consolidated with the town staff? I think the answer from school committee is sure, that's open. So, and then when we move, theoretically, when we move people out of certain sites into consolidation, which sites are left? And we haven't, we're just doing an inventory of what sites would be available. For example, Council on Aging moving to Peabody, Harvey Wheeler, 55 Church Street, other buildings, there are half dozen or more buildings that would be vacated with consolidation, just of the municipal staff. So that's kind of where we are.
I'll just,
right now.
can I add one thing? We started to put together our needs assessment, which is the first thing. And I think we did a good job of explaining what we're doing and why. I think we still need to come up with metrics and things like the cost and the timing of some of our short list recommendations.
Yeah, it's a little bit of chicken egg, because Mary's putting together the needs assessment, because we asked the question, why are we doing this? What are the benefits? to the town of consolidation. That's an important step, which we will start to articulate tomorrow, I think.
Yes.
Oh, how are you handling, the Peabody Fields and, since I'm a baseball guy, the Ripley Fields? Soccer and baseball.
Right now, I think we're looking at Peabody Building. I think there's significant interest in maintaining Cushing Field as a field. It's a little bit out of our charge to look at municipal consolidation, but that's what I know about the Cushing Field. As far as the Ripley Field, again, that's out of our, I mean, if the building is vacated, I think the field remains for recreational use. I don't think there's any talk about removing either field at this point, but that's our committee hasn't talked about.
The answer may be that it's in phase 2 and that unfortunately, and I think it ought to move up a little sooner. So recreation open space is in phase 2 along with commercial and housing. And maybe
Well, the fate of existing recreational facilities is probably, I'm not sure it's in our charge. I'll have to talk to the co-chairs and figure that out.
You will have to figure it out. Okay. That's it for now from the subcommittees. I think we touched on data needs in the different discussions here. Anything over and above what we discussed today where any of you said there is a very specific data need right now that we should add to the long list of things? Yeah,
Actually,
yeah, Mary.
yeah, one of the things when we were visiting MCI, we all took a tour of the old warden's house, the superintendent's house, and that might be one of the things we would consider for consolidation of municipal offices. And if anybody has any information about what kind of historical protections that building has, I think that would be data that would be helpful to us. I don't know. I'm at a loss for where.
Probably reach then out to our whatever planning department. There she is, Elizabeth.
Elizabeth.
Unmute, Elizabeth.
Yep.
There you go.
So, Senior Planner Ann Clifford.
Yeah.
The Historical Commission submitted a letter to the MCI Advisory Board regarding the superintendent's building.
But was she clear about what the restrictions, the current restrictions are?
So there currently are no restrictions. It's not.
Good to know.
But I'll find the memo and.
Okay, Linda has her hand up here.
I believe it's eligible for restrictions, but it is not currently restricted.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. Thanks, both of you.
So Linda, what's the process of restriction?
Whomever is in control of the property would apply for, a registration under the Historical Act, and then it would be limited. And I don't know the degree of limitations on both the exterior and the interior. But I would say that Ann's letter is very detailed. And I believe it's on our MCU.
Yeah, it is. I can send it out to you all.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Okay. Then let's move to public comments. And I saw Don always raising his hand and then disappearing and raising his hand and disappearing. Don, you want to say something?
Thanks. I thank you, Sven. I didn't want to interrupt or the committee members' flow of thought. I wanted to though echo Judith's earlier excellent point about the cost of renovation. There is that 60% rule of thumb, and also that if you have to do an extensive renovation of 60% or more, of a structure, it's more cost effective to start over because it just costs more per square foot to renovate than it does to build new. Just harder to run ducts and things through, make things work. So with that in mind, I would suggest that that you also consider owned properties through that lens, because you may be able to quickly rule them out, in or out of any use. Because why waste time considering, could we use it for this or that or another thing, only to discover that it costs twice as much as building a whole new building. And in that case, then if there is something like the Peabody building, I mean, the real cost there of this exercise is the opportunity cost. It stays, if ultimate disposition is redevelopment, then it could be moved on to the tax rolls sooner. That's all. Okay. But I would say certainly Ripley building, Peabody building could be viewed through that lens. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Alan Cassidy.
Yeah, Alan Cathcart, Director of Public Works. Just a comment, and I just want to emphasize the fact that this initiative is not a staff-driven want to desire issue. In fact, I don't think there's any senior manager in any department who was around when this work was getting done. In fact, many have been here less than a couple of years. I think this is the town's need and interest to understand its long-term desires. And I think really when you're talking to staff, it's not what do they want, it's what are the services that they're providing? How do they see the service gap with what they see the community is asking for? And that may kind of inform this. So I just want to emphasize that I want to make sure you understand staff right now, and I'm cautious, they hear about these studies, there's some angst and concern. Some are very happy where they are and they're hearing they may be moved. Many may not be here when something happens, but I just make sure when you're talking about staff, it's not a want, need, it's basically the community decide that. So.
I have one, but no. I guess the one thing I struggle with, Alan, is that I'm not sure the public at large understands some of the challenges that we as insiders, if you will, have seen. And it wouldn't be feasible to have the town go through all the facilities we've seen. And I'm wondering, looking at Dakota here, it might make sense to come up with some sort of, I hate to say it, campaign, because it's not slanted, but to educate the people as to, if people may say, why the heck do we need a new fire station? Well, we need a new fire station for these 4 reasons. Oh, I didn't know that the communication center of the police department was flooded. So on one hand, we don't want to scare people and we don't want to create chaos, but we want to inform them to the extent when we do start asking for MCI approvals, zoning, we start asking for money for the wastewater facility, it's not a surprise. And I'm not sure that as a resident, I appreciated the levels of direness of some of these facilities. Again, I don't know how to gingerly, in a balanced way, informed but don't shock, but inform people that it's coming down the road and people are trying to be thoughtful about it. And these are real issues, and it's not frivolous, it's not the staff, it's not what have you. And everyone's trying to work together here. It needs to be balanced.
Yeah.
I'll make a public comment.
Yes.
In that regard, I think you might want to use the bridge as a way to communicate, whether it's through articles or letters, where you as a committee, and the committee co-chairs, publish something that says, this is the task force, we got started in July, this is the charge, this is the, the dire needs we see, or, something that is going to get greater publicity than just having the meetings.
Yeah, and I think it's the Warner's Point Task Force did that every now and then, that the co-chairs issued a kind of a letter to the bridge and things like that. But I think it's let's add communication strategy to the work plan or workflow and see how Because I mean, one way is you also don't want to make it too early, and when you still a lot of things to in play, but on the other hand, to your point is, there are certain dire needs that the public needs to understand.
Even like some of the information, we went to the MCI workshop with the three scenarios. I don't think the person at large understands some of the wastewater limitations we have.
Yeah.
Some of the school limitations we may or may not have, and I understand there's some debate there. But at some level, we need to put it in context as to why things are needed. And what considerations that people may not be aware of are evident in the, or being, assessed.
There's so many different ways of needed communication here. There's, why is this task, why is this working group formed? And then in there's some very important issues. So I mean, I think the bridge would be a great outlet. Megan Zammuto's civic podcast, getting that as a podcast and letting people know of that podcast. Just another way. In this town, you can't communicate through one.
No,
You have to go
I learned
multi-mechanism.
last years,
If you want people to understand what's going
you
on.
said something 100 times and you still find people who haven't heard it.
All available outlets, because I think that the issue is really important.
Yeah.
Communication is really important.
So, okay, gets on the work plan and we have to put some brain logic behind this. Let's go, before we adjourn, we have to a little bit talk about next meetings and calendar. So last time we said we do it bi-weekly, the next meeting would fall on Labor Day. I can't imagine you're jumping up and down with joy to meet on Labor Day.
Yeah.
In addition, there are two additional parameters to think about. Do we have to give the subcommittees a little bit more time? Thinking about the large group is meeting every 3 weeks, so the subcommittees can have more time to meet in between. That's one question. And the other question is, just logistically, it turned out that if we do it Mondays, the two co-chairs have significant issues to get it done Mondays in person. So if it's later in the week, it would help that at least one co-chair can be here in person. And Judith and I we already looked at each other calendar and there are periods where I'm gone and she's there and vice versa. So first question is,
You look at the week of the week of Labor Day.
so right now we had said September 1st, which is Labor Day. Does it make sense to move this more towards the end of the week to give also the subcommittees more time, given Labor Day weekend anyway? So that would be first. A Thursday and a Friday would be best if you look to the co-chair calendars, but just want to put that out in what the group is thinking.
Okay.
It's okay?
This time.
So there will be a Friday. That is something that ends on Friday prior to like 4 o'clock.
And then it needs to end by Friday, 4 o'clock. So you could do Thursday, 4 p.m. instead, generally.
Thursday doesn't work for me.
Or 30 doesn't work.
No, Friday works.
But then we have to do it earlier. Then we have to do it something like 2 p.m.
Does that work?
Friday the 5th? Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then should we do it from there on every 3 weeks from now?
Every third Friday.
Yeah.
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 Well,
Okay.
yeah, book it and then.
We book it and then probably I come back again and say, sorry, there's another conflict. Yes.
Fridays every 3 weeks.
Yeah, starting with the 5th. Yeah.
What time? 2.
2 p.m.
Thank you.
And we are done by 4 and.
Very good.
Don't forget with Friday Night Football.
I'm not a football guy, so I'm a soccer guy as a German.
So you're a football.
Okay, with that, do I have a motion to adjourn? Second. Can we just say, give a big shout like aye instead of doing a roll call? Is that possible?
Aye.
I see people, sorry?
The chair can just adjourn.
I can just adjourn. Okay, then I do adjourn.